Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Getting Hammered. I am your host, Mary Katharine Ham. I am here with my co-host, Vic Matus of the Free Beacon. We are your morning show for any hour. We got a lot going on. Obviously, there's going to be an Israel and foreign affairs update, as well as a campus climate update. Let's find out more about that. We have a speaker update, but God knows what's happening. Who knows? We'll see by tomorrow. It'll be a whole different world. And some news from Oregon and Washington, D.C.'s crime spree, new crime environment. But before we get to that, Vic, how are you doing?
Hello, Mary Katharine. One of the little joys in my life is watching movies. Now that my son is a teenager, watching just fun movies that I actually enjoy, right? And movies that he hasn't yet seen. So the other day, I don't know how it came up, but it was on Netflix, so we decided to watch Backdraft, the Ron Howard movie about firefighters from 1991. And he liked it. He liked it a lot. He's a big Robert De Niro fan. But the question is, does Backdraft hold up? Okay, I'm going to say yes and no. Okay. It's so earnest. I mean, it's endearing in that way. It's just so earnest about firefighters are good and here's what they do. And the music is so uplifting. And even the villain is not really quite a villain in the sense that he's just trying to protect his, firefighting, his brothers from these cutbacks, and job cuts, because they can't do a good enough job putting out fires because of corruption in the city. So, like the real villain is like the alderman. So I get that. That's fine. Okay. What is bad about it? Billy Baldwin. That's what's bad about it. You watch, he can't act in this movie. And I mean, I guess I can't remember. It's been so long since I've seen Sliver. But really, it's so clear that he's there as the face. He's there to bring in.
Which, by the way, doesn't make sense because Kurt Russell is a face.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Okay. Like, I'm going to say it. And he plays the older brother. And he's oldish. I don't know how old Kurt Russell was at the time, but he is a good-looking man, Kurt Russell. And
dude, from Disney days to Rock and Roll Santa Claus, the whole way he's a snack. The whole way.
Absolutely. Grand to Guardians of the Galaxy. He is, and Snake Plissken, of course, but he is very charismatic. And he's, of course, an amazing actor. Billy Baldwin, awkward. The line delivery. And I'll tell you what's weird. He's also playing opposite of Jennifer Jason Leigh. And she's fine in other movies I've seen, Fast Times. But she is so stiff in this movie. Like she can't actually, her facial expression is like, it's like almost like a stroke victim where she can't actually, do anything. It's weird. It's just very weird. Okay, now here's the weirdest part about Backdraft. It came out in 1991. There is a scene where there is an arsonist behind bars played by Donald Sutherland. And Billy Baldwin needs to go to him to find out who he thinks the person behind all these arson attacks and murders is. And he has to go to the prison, and it's a quid pro quo where he's like, okay, I'll tell you about what I think, but first tell me about when you were a child and did the fire look at you? And I'm like, wait a minute, this seems so familiar. And of course it was Silence of the Lambs. But the weirdest thing is they came out the same year. So it's not like one was, I think, stealing from the other. It just happened to be one of these really weird coincidences. Okay,
maybe that's what we were doing in 1991. We were interfacing with our inner children. Maybe that's what we were doing.
That's right. And talking to inmates for insight.
Speaking of which, I should clarify that I was a child when I had a crush on child Kurt Russell, okay? Just so I don't sound too much like inappropriate Vic commentary. And now I am a grown woman.
Did you just say Vic commentary? How dare you? Now, Mary Katharine, did you see Backdraft in the theater or did you see it later or did you not see
we were definitely a home video family.
Oh, okay.
It was very rare that we saw things in the theater. So I definitely saw that one on video. Did the top of the fire engine scene hold up for you there, Vic?
Yes, it is. I
think you're right that Billy is not top in the Baldwin brother rankings.
No. And just kind of a bad actor in that movie. I will say this though, you know what I really loved about it, what made it work? Again, this is one of my long time, complaints. Practical effects.
Yeah.
it was dangerous, you know? I mean, so they always had these Chicago firefighters on the scene, you know, to make sure that everything that as technical consultants that but they wanted real fire, and it shows and you feel it. There was a movie I had to watch a couple years ago with Angelina Jolie as a firefighter in a forest fire.
Hmm.
The forest fires were all CGI'd.
Yeah.
So, and you can tell that the forest is not really on fire. I'm not saying that I want the forest on fire.
You don't want Angelina arsoning an entire
No, but
acreage.
she could have taken down the fire, but you're not convinced when you're watching it because
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, this isn't real. This is what am I watching here? It's like a cartoon. So that's all I want to say is backdrafted retrospect. Love the practical effects. Kurt Russell is great. Rebecca De Mornay is always
Oh,
good.
we love Rebecca De Mornay.
Yes, we do. But Billy Baldwin is not. So just leave it at that. In case you're wondering, it's on Netflix. Check it out. Mary Katharine, how are you and where are you?
Well, speaking of harrowing, I had
Yes.
had a challenging travel day yesterday. I am in the lovely Southern California sun right now.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
I'm in Southern California for an event. I'm doing a speech and just a sort of a election preview,
Good.
political forecast type thing with a liberal counterpart, Liz Smith, for the California Chamber of Commerce. So that should be fun.
Sure, it's going to be very uplifting.
I know, right? That's our challenge for this event. Keep it lunch appropriate at this luncheon. Anyway, so I'm out here. So I flew across the country, had one stop on the way. I didn't nonstop it this time. I didn't get too fancy with it, Vic. But when I got here,
Yes.
look, this is partially on me and partially bad luck. I did run my phone down to almost nothing while on the plane when I could have had it plugged in.
Charge
and
it. Yeah,
I
you
didn't.
can charge it. That's a new thing.
I could have
now.
used my computer on the plane instead of my phone. I could have read a book on the plane. I did not do those things. So I let it get low. And then here's the bad luck part. When I walked off the plane and when I tried to at the last minute charge it, the charger had malfunctioned. So the USB was not working anymore. So it was very, very slowly charging. And like it would do that thing where it blinks off of charging and then back on charging, off.
Is it
and on.
because of frayed wires? Do you have the frayed? That's my problem.
I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, they do that on purpose so that you have to buy another one.
So, knowing this, I walk out into LAX and think to myself, I'll just pick up a USB. Easy peasy at one of these places. But I took the wrong turn and ended up on the opposite side of the security before I got to a store.
Oh, no.
So,
You mean you went through the doors where you can't go back?
yeah, so I couldn't go. I
That's
couldn't
like
go back.
I'm so scared of that. I
Yeah.
guess because they won't let. It's like East Germany. You can't.
No,
cross
you
it.
can't. You
No,
can't
no,
cross
that's
that line.
it. It's like a
So I'm
checkpoint.
like, okay, that was unwise.
Oh,
So
no.
I'm not going back through security to go get a USB cord. I'm like, it'll charge. It's fine. I'll go sit at baggage claim. I've been on a plane all day and I'm like, I'm going to sit at I made this problem for myself. There's no one to be mad at but me. I'm going to sit at baggage
And there's
claim.
no
and
other
plug-
store where you are.
No, because now we're just at baggage claim. So I'm going to plug my phone in and see what happens. So I sit there for, I don't know, 20 minutes, letting it charge, just balancing it so
Okay.
that it will stay with the little lightning
Yes.
sign on it. And it gets up to 2%.
Oh
And
my
I'm like,
gosh.
this is not enough to get me to a lift, right?
Yeah, because this is how everything is done. What are you going to do? Hail a cab with your like in the
So-
old fashioned?
And I have to get either a shuttle or an Uber to a rental car place, where I have a rental car. I've figured that out. I did that
Good.
ahead of time. LAX is terrible. So in the end, I'm sitting there waiting for it to charge. It's not charging anymore. So I take my 2%er and I go out to get the shuttle. The shuttle has to take you to another lot where you get an Uber to the rental car.
No.
Okay. It's a lot. And the shuttle isn't even short. It's like a 20-minute shuttle to the place where you can get a cab from the airport. I mean, wild. You can get a very luxury Lyft or Uber, but you cannot get a regular one if you are just standing at the baggage claim. So I go, and of course, my 2%er has gone to 0% by the time I get there, at which point I have to do something unthinkable, Vic.
Yeah.
I got a cab.
Oh yeah, I was going to say. So you hailed a cab? Did you like wave?
I got a cab. There was a cab stand.
Yeah.
And I
Oh,
stood
there's
in
a
line
cab.
and I got in a yellow
Yeah.
car,
Yeah.
put my bags in
Yeah.
there, hoped he took credit
Mhm.
card.
I was going to say, and then you paid cash.
Yeah. Don't you know I don't have
You
that.
slipped it into the slot. You know.
So we drive over to my place to pick up my car. And he actually, I will tell you, and this is the beauty of the market, because taxi cabs are no longer in
Yeah.
demand, it cost $18 less than the Lyft was
Yes.
showing me.
Yes. They're trying,
So
competition is good in that way because then, it forces them to either, you go out of the business or you make a cleaner, better experience.
yes. So my saintly cab driver
Yeah.
let me charge my phone a little bit in there. So I got it up to like 8%.
Oh, and he was able to, he had a real charger. So that's good.
So then I'm picking up my car and they've misplaced my car. But you know what? All of this is okay. Do you know why? Because
Why?
the weather here is great.
That's
And
right.
so once you get off the
Makes everybody
plane,
chill.
even if you're standing outside,
Yeah.
I know the LA people are spoiled, but I'm not spoiled. I get off and I stand waiting for my rental car that they've lost. And I think, this is okay. But what did I do again while I was standing out there, Vic? I ran my damn phone down again.
Were you
I ran it down.
were you
And then I get
watching
in,
videos on Twitter
yeah,
or
and then I
something?
get in my car and I'm like, well, how am I going to get anywhere?
No.
How are you going to know where to go, MK?
Oh, no. Yeah, because now you need directions. What did you have to
So
go get a Rand McNally map from the gas
I
station?
almost did. You know what I did is I got a new USB from the gas station. And just in case anybody's worried about me,
Yeah.
it was light outdoors.
Yeah.
And I went to a gas station right next to a Trader Joe's. So I felt like
There
that
you
was pretty safe.
Okay.
I got myself a USB and I got on my way. It took some doing, but it made me think this, Vic. We used to live like that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you would just be in a strange place and you would figure it out.
Oh, I sometimes think about, when I'm standing in line somewhere, that people just stood in line. They were not looking at phones. They just stood there, deep in reflection.
Yeah.
Or maybe if you were smart, you brought a newspaper. I remember waiting in line to vote once, and you bring a newspaper, read the whole paper while you're there. And that was it.
I was on the shuttle sitting next to about a 9-year-old girl across from her family. She was the only person without a phone, so we chatted a little bit.
Yeah. No,
I was an adult from 1993, taking a cab, having no phone, and she was a little girl, and we chatted about the doll that she was playing with.
I'm sure that was a good conversation. That's the big complaint, that kids don't know how to read maps anymore and things like that, like an old-fashioned map. And this is the funny thing. If I'm talking to my in-laws and I'm going somewhere, oh, you know about this place? I go, yeah. And I have my phone, so it shows you. And immediately, forget the phone. They got to take out this ginormous map and then spread it out on the dining room table or an atlas,
you got to orienteer.
That's it.
Is that the word? You got to orienteer?
Orienteer. I'll tell you this. The exact opposite experience from like 2 years ago. We went to visit our friends up in Maine, right? The Eastlands and the Messengers.
Nice.
And I had never been to we flew to Bangor Airport, right? So we get to Bangor and I decided we're going to rent a car because, you need a car up there in Maine. So we get it to the airport. You just walk out of the gate, and the rental car place it's a very small airport. So we go there and I'm expecting a line. There's no line. Go right up to the Hertz. And I said, okay, we're here. I got my papers to pick up this car. Where do I have to go? She goes, oh, it's right out there. I go, well, no, I mean, like they probably need to take a shuttle or something. And no, your car is out there. I go, well, where exactly? She goes, and she's pointing at it. She goes, it's literally
that
out,
car.
Like you look out the window, there's your Nissan and the key's in it already. And you're like, what? And then, you go out of the parking lot, boom, you're on the road.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. That's a small airport experience.
Love Bangor. Yeah.
We love that. All right. We should probably get to the news.
Let's do it.
All right. So we have updates from Israel.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, inappropriately, I pull up my browser and it has just a big picture of heartthrob Kurt Russell in backdraft because I was Googling while you were talking about that story.
He's a man. Okay.
All right. But the Israel ground incursion seems poised to start soonish into Gaza. What's discouraging about this, of course, is that there has been so much consternation about Israel doing anything to defend itself even before there's a ground incursion, which, by the way, will be extremely costly to the IDF.
Yeah.
Because they will be attempting to spare civilian lives while they do this work.
They're not intentionally.
Yes.
know,
ridding Gaza of
right.
Hamas. So this is CNN reporting. A ground incursion by Israel into Gaza now seems inevitable. On Thursday, Israeli defense minister told troops gathered near the border that they would soon see the enclave from the inside and Gaza will never be the same. He later pledged the expected incursion will be the last maneuvering inside Gaza due to the simple reason that Hamas will cease to exist. It might take a month too, but eventually there will be no Hamas.
Yes. I was watching the other day Mossab Hassan Youssef, who's the son of a Hamas commander, and he has been working with the Israelis and he is pro-Israel now, and he gets it. And he said that the only option for Israel is to rid Gaza and the Middle East of Hamas and end the brainwashing of the children who become killers. They were talking about the aid and the importance of getting aid to the people of Gaza. And he said, you know who's not getting aid? The hostages. That's who's not. But, and as you know, there have been a trickle of hostages released. The first ones being the extended family that Martin Fletcher mentioned on MSNBC, and then I believe two others. I hate to paraphrase Trump on this when he was talking about Hezbollah and say that they're geniuses, but Hamas knows what they're doing, right? They know exactly what they're doing, and it's working, because if they can stretch this out and say, "Hey, well, hold on now, before you do a ground invasion, maybe we'll let a couple more." They have over 200 hostages to choose from. They can release a couple, delay the invasion, and the longer you delay it, the more people will start to, say, well, let's see if we can give peace a chance, let diplomacy work, both sides. And it happened. And I know we're going to talk about this in a moment about Barack Obama's statement and Karine Jean-Pierre. Biden the other day did a thing we condemn, Islamophobia as well as anti-Semitism. So what's the plan? Is it like they were somehow going to negotiate the release of the other 198 and in exchange for what? Right. So that
that's the thing. They can keep asking for things as well.
Yeah. And they have imprisoned Hamas terrorists. Some of the United States. Is the plan that we release them so they can one day kill more, and then what about the murdered 1,500 already? We just gonna leave Hamas in control of Gaza, and that's fine.
In a rare, you love to hear it, for a huge segment of Hollywood. First of all, a group led by Alyssa Milano put out a statement asking for a ceasefire a couple of days ago.
I saw that one.
And a responding statement has come from the likes of Amy Schumer, Sacha Baron Cohen, Chris Rock, Gwyneth Paltrow, Katy Perry, Bradley Cooper, Justin Timberlake.
Gwyneth Paltrow? Did you say Gwyneth Paltrow?
I did indeed.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Called #No Hostage Left Behind. We are heartened by Friday's release of 2 American hostages, Judith Renan and her daughter, Natalie Renan, and by today's release of 2 Israelis, Nurit Cooper and Yocheved Lifshitz, whose husbands remain in captivity. But our relief is tempered by our overwhelming concern that 220 innocent people, including 30 children, remain captive by terrorists, threatened with torture and death. And they ask that every voice rise up to do this bare minimum, which is to get civilians out of this. By the way, we should always point out Hamas could surrender and give these people over and everything would be over now.
That's right.
Now.
That's right. But it's not the plan. I was also going to mention this other Hamas commander, Barak Ali. He was on Russian television giving an interview, and he said that this operation took years of planning, and the key was to convince the Israelis and the West that they were actually interested in governing, when in fact they had only one interest, and that's to kill. Again, they don't want a piece of Israel. They want all of it.
Well, and again, that's what makes the ceasefire calls so obtuse and wrong.
Right.
Is that if you have someone on the other side saying that, regardless of the fact that there are indeed other people in Gaza who are not aligned with that entirely, if you leave that threat looming, you will incur the same losses again. This is what they desire to do. They've made it very clear.
Yeah. So Admiral John Kirby, the White House spokesman, one of the spokesmen, he said the other day that, the U.S. will respond in our time of choosing, right? But I keep thinking we haven't had any definitive response to the 30 some odd Americans who were murdered by Hamas, and God knows who else who may be still hostage over there. And it's just this idea that, I don't know, if you were to tell me terrorists kill 30 Americans, shouldn't we respond? And Hamas is in fact a U.S. designated terror group, that the President Biden would have something more definitive to say about this. Again, the U.S. has been attacked by Iran and its proxies, like supposedly it was like 86 times, right? And we've only retaliated 4 times. I don't know why we want to buy them. Well, all we're doing is buying them more time.
Right.
And I think they know that we're going to do that because we're a joke to them.
Well, and yeah, I think it's a matter of how much emphasis is put on these
Yeah.
things, as you point out. And look, I think the loss to Israel was so great that I was a bit remiss in not focusing more and mentioning more that 30 Americans lost their lives and there are Americans inside Gaza, right? But it is surprising that it isn't much of the talk, especially since much of the media has moved on to the crisis, the humanitarian crisis inside Gaza. As an example of this, former President Obama wrote on Medium. He had some thoughts about this conflict.
Yeah.
It's nice that he has a column on Media now that he can self-publish. I thought he was going to paywall me. I clicked over to it and it looked like it was going to sell me on Medium subscriptions. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, 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 President Obama. But when we talk about emphasis, I checked it. It's a pretty long piece he's written.
Yes.
110 words of it are devoted to 1,400 dead.
Not a surprise coming from somebody who is writing multi-volume memoirs. So just not.
Yeah.
Not just
so the first 2 paragraphs are devoted to 1,400 people dead and 200 plus hostages.
And then you know what's coming.
Mm-hmm. But I'll read the 3rd paragraph. But even as we support Israel, we should also be clear that how Israel prosecutes this fight against Hamas matters. In particular, it matters as President Biden has repeatedly emphasized that Israel's military strategy abides by international law, including those laws that seek to avoid, to every extent possible, the death or suffering of civilian populations. Yes, whether that law 2 weeks ago, right? The international law.
Yeah.
No one else.
We demand one side abide by the international law.
By the way, I guess it's like only cool to drone strike weddings when it's Barack Obama.
Oh, that is, or Joe Biden for that matter, when we were supposed to respond after the Afghanistan pullout, and he killed an innocent family. Nobody seems to want to keep up, bring that up, except here on the show.
So that's the focus, and beyond that, Karine Jean-Pierre, who has now walked this back a bit, but at yesterday's briefing, I believe we have some audio of her being asked about some of the things we've seen stateside.
His level of concern right now about the potential rise of anti-Semitism in light of everything that's going on in Israel.
So a couple of things. We have not seen any credible threats. I know there's been always questions about credible threats, and so just want to make sure that that's out there. But look, Muslim and those perceived to be Muslim have endured a disproportionate number of hate-fueled attacks. And certainly President Biden understands that many of our Muslim, Arab Americans and Palestinian American loved ones and neighbors are worried about the hate being directed at their communities, and that is something you heard the president speak to in his address just last Thursday. And so one of the things that the president has done is directed his team, Homeland Security team, to prioritize prevention and disruption of any emerging threats that could harm the Jewish, the Muslim, Arab Americans, or any other communities. And that is something that the president has sought to do and since day one. As you know, the president ran on bringing protecting communities, obviously, but bringing people together, protecting the soul of the nation, and so that is something that the president takes very, very seriously, and we're going to continue to denounce any sort of hate towards any American here, and so that's what we're going to continue to be steadfast on. Again, he has directed his Homeland Security team to make sure that they're on top of this.
She passed on that question.
No, I'll tell you what. I think I have it figured out. She was anticipating a question about Islamophobia and Islamophobic acts, and so whatever the question was, it was blah blah blah. Israel, blah, blah, blah. Forget about the anti-Semitism part. Or maybe she thought in her mind it was going to be something else. And then, boom, the message. Because it's all pre-programmed, right? And she stays on message. So I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt.
You're kinder than I am.
I'm giving you the benefit of that. Like in her mind, she wanted to get this message out. And so she just was in her mind, blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's this one. And then you input the answer. And the answer was to the wrong question. Is she now saying, oh, I misunderstood the question? Or Or
Okay.
is she saying, oh,
I will read her update.
okay.
She tweeted, to be clear, the president and our team are very concerned about a rise in anti-Semitism, especially after the horrific Hamas terrorist attack in Israel.
Yeah.
But the thing is, she tweeted that. She didn't say it live, and she didn't say it at the moment. At the moment, she said,
It's weird.
we don't see anything. We don't see anything of concern. In New York, there's video of large crowds,
Oh, sure.
as they have the
Yes.
perfect right
Yes.
to do, assembling and chanting. There's only one solution. Intifada revolution. I think
Yep.
we all know what that means. A rabbi in Detroit was murdered, stabbed to death, and we are yet to have the exact facts of that case, but
Well,
certainly
police say that-
reason to be concerned.
Police there say motive is unclear, and they have no reason to believe at the moment it was a hate crime.
And then
which-
hold
yeah.
on, but like this is the rallies
Mm-hmm.
again that are free speech, and hate speech is free speech.
Yeah.
An equivalent would be if the Trump White House saw rallies in support of the Charlottesville killing.
Yeah. Yeah.
All over the country.
Right. And they were celebrating on the streets.
And no one needed to say anything
Yeah.
about that, or no one was concerned about that.
Yeah.
I mean, it defies belief that
Right.
would be the case for the press or for someone like Karine Jean-Pierre. And yet the White House was just tweeting the same message,
Right.
backed up by her in this, because I think that's what they're focused on, because they're stuck in this sort of academic loop
Yeah.
where the real victims can't be the victims.
I was thinking that when she said there were no credible threats, she was thinking about terrorist alerts. And if that's true, I hope she's right. But again, I feel like she has these canned answers in her mind. And so when certain questions come up, that she just regurgitates the point. And I think this was like an error when she did this to this woman's question. But that's being charitable. I understand.
You are
that.
being,
I-
you know what?
And don't get me wrong. I think she's terrible. She's terrible, and she really does. Well, she stays on message.
Well, and
Nobody who
here-
would want to stop.
the through line also for so much of this administration is that the brand is empathy and the product is the opposite of it.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, the Jewish community, and I saw people tweeting about this yesterday, has been through something extremely traumatic yet again.
Right.
And I think it's having more of an impact than the people speaking about it publicly in this administration, at least,
Yeah.
are recognizing.
Do you
Um,
think they secretly know, or do you think that they're completely oblivious about what's going on here and the problem?
I think there's
the problem that they
just-
have in this country, as well as obviously in
I
this
think there are just so many political allies who they don't want to tick off.
Yeah, I
And
think
they're
that's
also
a big
very
I know.
steeped.
I think that's a big.
They're very steeped
consideration.
in this ideology.
Yes, they are, and they also seem to think that their beliefs in other areas, particularly when it comes to equity and DEI and human rights, and certainly for like the LGBTQ community, and they seem to think that gels perfectly with what's going on with the Palestinians, when in fact it's not quite an overlap.
Right.
Right. I mean, there are certain issues that Hamas might not agree with them on. And here's the other thing. You mentioned this before, which is we're now getting visual proof, right? Because Israel's like, okay, you people have been questioning, where's the proof? And we have collected enough of the evidence and gone through it all. We're going to now present this to you. And it's beginning to come up sometimes unexpectedly if you're going through your Twitter feed and you're not prepared for it. It's horrific. And the first thing that came to mind in the attacks, especially on these kibbutzim, there was a book by Jan Gross called Neighbors about the Polish village of Jedwabne after the Nazis invaded.
Right.
And really, it was partly, obviously, the Germans, but there was a good chunk of the people in that town that said, hey, we're happy to do the work for you. And you're beginning to hear about this now as stories come out. Our own Andrew Tobin, who is based in Tel Aviv, he has written about this. And how, Hamas invited all Palestinians to cross over the border and just go crazy and do what you want. And there are eyewitness reports that these are people who are not part of Hamas doing horrific, horrific things. But at the same time, I'm thinking none of this is going to convince them. Rashida Tlaib is not convinced that a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket hit the parking lot of a hospital. She
No,
maintains, she's tripled down on it, and she's just said it just today.
Did the New York Times ever correct the record?
Oh man, did you see the correction? And David Halbfinger of the New York Times, he tweeted it out, and he says, "When we get something wrong, we admit it." And I said, "Oh, this is going to be good." I clicked on the link, and they said that it was a rush to judgment. They did insist they were saying Palestinians say, but they never say, and in fact, it turns out it was a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket that hit the parking lot and the hospital still standing. Instead, it basically ends saying we should have rushed, but the Israelis, they said something different. So who knows?
Yeah, no, it's not our
We may
job to
never
sort
know.
these things out or anything. By the way, again, I'm going heavy on the analogies to American politics, but because the media can sort of understand this in their myopic view of the world, imagine the media running with Proud Boys press releases.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think Proud Boys and Hamas are analogous and like in their viciousness or their goals or any of that. But for the media, perhaps the media actually views them as far worse than Hamas, right?
Yeah.
But imagine them taking the word of a group that they deem to be on the other side.
And just say, oh,
They would never do it. They would never do it.
Right.
And just say, oh, well,
Yeah.
fog of war, we printed something from them.
The distinction of Hamas Health Ministry and Hamas is that's a very fine distinction. So that's.
By the way, life imitates art from the KJP incident, because not only did the Babylon Bee have ready to go before this happened, in strong response to rising hate crimes against Jews, Democrats denounced Islamophobia, but somebody noted they keep doing the Norm meme, which is the Norm Macdonald tweet. What terrifies me is if ISIS were to detonate a nuclear device and kill 50 million Americans, imagine the backlash against peaceful Muslims. It is the meme.
No, and people were saying that Biden just did that.
He just did it.
Again, Americans have been killed.
The empathy, not so much.
Yeah.
Not so much. Can we do a little campus climate?
Yeah, let's go.
Oh, I should also mention that there were pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas gatherings in Skokie, Illinois, which is famous for being the home of the Nazi march that was the basis of a very important free speech decision.
And they were represented by the ACLU.
Yes.
And I think they relocated the march, but nevertheless. And Skokie is a large Jewish community there.
Yes. Many Jews settled there when they came to America. There was this pro-Palestinian / pro-Hamas gathering that ended, at least in one situation, in the beating of a Jewish man on the street. That if you look closely, you can see where that passes from free expression to not in the video. And again, no one's worried about any of this. Meanwhile, on campus, and again, this is where I do think a principled free speech stand, you must stick up for people who say disgusting things on campus and that they have the right to say those things. You know what they don't have the right to do, Vic?
Yeah.
They don't have the right to stop other people's speech. They do not have the right to pull down these posters, which a bunch of disgusting people are doing.
I watched a video, by the way, of students doing this, tearing down posters and being confronted. And it's like, why are you tearing down this picture of this child who is kidnapped? And it's unclear to me if they believe it's lies and propaganda, it never happened, or it's going to help the other side gain sympathy, and we can't have that for the colonizers. And they're just like these brainwashed kids.
Well, yes, I think
they hate Israel.
I think it's a little bit of like...
And some of them are Jewish. I know some of them are Jewish. I saw that, but they hate Israel.
But I do think schools, this is a clear line. Schools should sanction students who are caught doing this, because that is blocking other people's speech. That is not free expression. And that's one where you can send a message that we are not going to allow this. Same with when they cross over into violence or cross over into vandalism. Sanction them. Yeah. Your message can be disgusting while you're speaking. You can't cross over into this other stuff. And by the way, speaking of what they actually believe, the Harvard-Harris poll, which is a legit poll, interviewed young people, polled them this week, and found that 51% of college-aged adults believe that Hamas killing 1,200 civilians was justified.
Oh my gosh.
More than 50%. Again, Again, could you find 51%? Just imagine this going the opposite direction. Could you find 51% of Republicans or an older, like a boomer age group who supported the killing of that woman in Charlottesville?
Yeah.
Who said it was justified?
It's shocking because these are people who also think that, the right wing are a bunch of, fascist Nazis, and they're the ones who think that the killing of these Jews is okay. The colleges are the ones, and the college administrators are the ones who are largely responsible for allowing this to happen. They hire these professors who brainwash these kids in the first place. And again, you have the shouting down on campuses, and when you had conservative speakers arrive, and that was okay. And, until recently, there was beginning to be this pushback, certainly with the judge in California at Stanford, who was shouted down, and who was, not just from students, but also a faculty advisor saying that, his presence was harmful. And these people have lost their minds, but they've enabled that. And that's the problem. I just saw a headline from the College Fix that says that Harvard has now 2,600 more administrators than they do undergrads. There's all these people there. There's a giant bureaucracy, and they're largely the ones who, they're hiring these professors.
At the very least, I think a nice thing to do would be to not subsidize the debt of these people.
Yeah, I mean, great. Again,
if I could not be on the chart
for the rest of them. It's like it's a wake up call for certainly students, maybe some professors, and certainly donors to say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on?
Oh, by the way, I have a piece in Outkick this week about this, saying that, look, this is what I explained on the show last week, which is like losing a few students, losing six-figure job prospects because they came out pro murder of innocent civilians is what we had before cancel culture, which is the most extreme speech is not encouraged, but you're free to express those things. Yeah. That was before everything was problematic and got punished. So it's a matter of degree. By the way, this polling also shows that 62% of the exact same group who thinks Hamas was justified, can be justified by the grievance of Palestinians, also thought the massacre was genocidal. So we're at justified genocide with the 18 to 24s. It's not a great look. Let me play a little bit of a clip from a Columbia professor, an Israeli professor, Israeli American, and he has young kids, and he talks about why this is a problem.
Yeah. An amazing 7-year-old son. Every night before I tuck him to sleep, we read a chapter of Harry Potter. And yet, to the students, to the pro-terror student organizations at Columbia, my 7-year-old son is a legitimate target of resistance just because he's Israeli. I have a 2-year-old daughter, a feisty 2-year-old daughter. She has 2 songs that are her favorite, Baby Shark and Shake It Off by Taylor Swift. And yet, to the pro-terror student organizations on campus here and at Harvard and at NYU and at Stanford and at Berkeley and at Northwestern, my 2-year-old daughter is a legitimate target of resistance. That is what they are selling. You are allowed to murder and kidnap my 2-year-old daughter in the name of resistance.
He's in the minority here, though.
Well, certainly on campus.
Yeah.
It's nice to hear that so plainly from someone on campus and so forcefully. And then one last thing I want to close with, once again, I want to sort of stay focused on victims of this massacre and some survival stories, just because they're, it gives us a little bit of a break from the horror of the whole thing. I mean, this is horrific, but there is a light at the end of the story. Kai was just 9 days old when Hamas terrorists tried to murder him and his parents. For hours, his parents held the door of their shelter in Kibbutz Niram closed with all their strength against the terrorists, who eventually gave up and decided to burn down the house instead. The family hid in the smoking shelter for 6 hours. The smoke was harsh on little Kai, so his parents opened a window at great risk and lay him there for air while occasionally putting fingers in his mouth so his cries would not alert the terrorists. Miraculously, they were saved and are recovering. They did lose the family dog. I didn't put a trigger warning on that, so I didn't explain that part. But there's a picture of this tiny, tiny baby sitting in a windowsill at great risk to everyone. And thank God they're alive. And we'll continue praying for those who are still in Gaza and hope that they can be extracted quickly.
Yeah.
By the way, one more thing.
Yeah.
The hostages who have come back, their family members are still in Gaza. The 2 Israelis, their husbands are there. So when people tell you, "Oh, look, she says they got great treatment," first of all, that treatment, even if it was a spa, does not justify taking someone from their home forcibly and keeping them in Gaza for 2 weeks and separating them from their husbands. But also, they have relatives there. So what they say will be monitored by the people keeping their husbands. So just everybody keep that in mind. The psychology of this is weird. Okay.
They're not being kidnapped. They're being detained.
Yeah, that was another big media ass showing. Everybody's doing great. Yeah. Okay. Shall we move on to a speaker race update? I don't know why. Why, Vic?
3 weeks in, do you remember after Matt Gaetz pulled off his coup and he reassured the press outside with that massive gaggle on the steps of Capitol Hill saying, we'll get somebody. We'll get somebody. You know, Jim Jordan, Steve Scalise is great. We're going to do it. Could be as early as tomorrow. 3 weeks. That was 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago. And now we have the same issue in the speaker's race as we do in the Republican primary, which is that there are a bunch of people running. There's a front runner now, Tom Emmer, who is, again, is a leadership
Minnesota
member, which makes him persona non grata to the Gaetz 8. However, he is the front runner, but there are a bunch of people siphoning off votes. I believe the second man in line is Byron Donalds at this point, Florida congressman. So that's sort of where it stands. I know a couple of people have been dropping out, perhaps winnowing this field. So maybe it can be the 2 of them. But the problem with all of this, Vic, is that no matter who cobbles together the votes to be speaker, has not cobbled together a governing coalition.
No. Again, by the time our listeners hear this show, there probably is a new nominee, I'm assuming.
Hey, again, we can hope. We can hope to curse it with our early taping.
Yes. So there will be a nominee, but that does not mean that the nominee gets 217 votes. Because again, you're looking at Democrats who will vote no on every Republican, I imagine. And you're trying to convince, 5 members of your own side not to be peeled off and to vote for, something like sanity. The only end I know in sight, there's a definite end to this, and that would be the midterm elections, where the Democrats are going to make the case against dysfunction. You will not. That's it. They're going to say, "Do you want more of this clown show or not?"
Well, and it's an easy case to make.
Yeah.
Even though they help it as easy as possible.
Still,
Despite that, by the way, I believe there was a Siena poll out today. Again, a real poll. I believe that's the New York Times Siena poll, showing Trump far ahead of Biden in at least one swing state.
Yeah, and he leads at least by 4 points in multiple battleground states. So, and he is, his all his former associates are beginning to turn on him because of the RICO case in Georgia, and that's basically how RICO works. And it was, it's Sidney Powell and Cheesebro, and another woman just out today is turning against him as well. It's going to be a mess, and at some point, I don't know if other Republican voters will think, yes, I think I'm so sick and tired of the Democrats and Biden and Harris and the mess that we're in, but maybe somebody besides Trump. I don't know if they get there, but right now, Trump has his hands full.
But this speaks to, again, the matchup no one wants, and yet no one's bailing because Biden's sort of occupying this spot. Harris can't occupy the spot.
Hurtling toward this.
Trump has a bunch of people at his back who either see the poll numbers and are like, well, he can win, so why would I move off of this guy? Or want to avenge him for alleged unfairness, some of it genuinely unfair, others of it self-imposed. And we need a sound effect that is just 2024, race to the bottom. That is our...
we should do that.
That should be the jingle.
Okay, well, let's work on that. Okay.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, I'm sure we'll figure it out by the time this airs, guys, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Just as we said 3 weeks ago. Go ahead. You wanted to talk quickly about Oregon schools?
I do. Yeah. This is sort of emblematic of the faceplant that all of education is doing right now. And I had a thought while we were talking about the colleges. This is not a fully formed thought, but I do think
unusual in our podcast, but
I know. I do think that what I've heard anecdotally, and I would be interested in data on this, is that especially in the DC area, a lot of the driven, like sort of overscheduled type affluent high school students, achievers, who would have gone Ivy League or liberal arts northeastern school in the past, are trying to go SEC state school, Southern state schools.
Yeah.
Georgia in particular, I keep hearing from people, is very hard to get into. And I think the
That's
faceplant from the elite universities will probably accelerate this trend a bit. Again, I would like to see actual data, but I think this is twofold, because they didn't just faceplant during the past 2 weeks. This has obviously been a growing trend of anti-free speech behavior on campus and a sort of really special kind of intolerance. But they also, in Northeastern and elite universities, in California universities, did not allow students to have a college career, like a normal college existence for several years. And families noticed. Whereas if you go to Auburn, if you go to Georgia, if you go to Texas A&M, you're not going to be shutting your dorm taking dining hall food through a slot like they are in Wuhan, right? Like you're not going to end up in that situation. And so I think the combo of those two things is leading to maybe a little bit of a sea change in where the driven students are driven to go. We'll see. But you know where there will be no driven students? Oregon. The Oregon State Board of Education unanimously voted on Thursday to remove proof of mastery in reading, writing, and math in order to graduate from high school until 2029. The board argued that requiring all students to pass one of several standardized tests or to create an in-depth assignment their teacher judged as meeting state standards was a harmful hurdle for students of color, disabled students, or those learning English as a second language. The standardized tests will still be given, but will not play a role in determining whether students receive their diplomas.
Equity. This is about equity. If we can't make everybody equally brilliant, we'll just make them equally dumb, but as long as equity is achieved, that is the goal. There's no other objective than that. So it's like, these are people who, if they go to a doctor, maybe wasn't the best in medical school, but you know what? At least they know that equity was achieved when they're dying on the operating table or whatever it is, so it's like, it's perfect. It's for us. This makes absolutely no sense because you're making diplomas worthless, and you are not helping these minorities or any other person who is in their whatever their category is. You are not helping them in this way by saying, okay, well, don't worry about it. You don't have to go to school. You don't have to pass these tests or whatever. Here's your diploma. It makes it worthless, and you're not helping them in real life. Not going to be helping us either. But it is a perfectly logical conclusion for those people and their sort of woke agenda.
These institutions are failing and failing loudly, proudly.
Right.
That's the thing I take away from it is like, do you want your kids subjected to this? And by the way, same problem as the pandemic when the woke demanded that schools be closed. The practical result is more damage to those with less power, with fewer resources. But that doesn't seem to matter as long as the politics of it are quote unquote correct.
That's right.
So this will not go well for students advantaged or disadvantaged in Oregon, but the rich ones will get out of it without as much damage. That's what will happen.
Yeah.
Speaking of self-inflicted problems, this is a scoop from Axios. The DC mayor is unveiling a new tough on crime package. Vic, are you ready for this one?
Interesting. Yeah.
Okay. In the heat of a crime wave, this package would mark a U-turn for the Democratic city on policing reform, likely pitting Bowser against Muriel Bowser, the mayor here, against progressive council members. The forthcoming bill would empower police to declare, quote, drug-free zones across the city for 5-day spans, according to a preview of the legislation obtained by Axios, which leads one to ask, isn't the whole city supposed to be an illegal drug-free zone for all of the days? I guess it illustrates how much we've just given away that concept.
Yep.
The measure is an effort to outlaw congregating in public spaces for the purchase, sale, or use of illegal drugs. They might not take care of that, but I tell you what they do. They give me parking tickets. They take care of that.
Yeah, no, they're really good about
real
that.
well.
No.
So other features of this. And again, notice how each of these is a response to having shot themselves in the foot. Okay, Ready?
Yeah.
Number 1, retail theft would carry stiffer penalties via a new crime for, quote, directing organized retail theft. Turns out I guess it doesn't matter that those things are covered by insurance and it really does do damage. Wearing a mask while committing a crime would be outlawed again. Turns out maybe,
what if you have COVID
well,
while committing the
it's
crime?
it's hard to say.
You have to
Vic.
explain that to the judge. Okay.
The legislation also revises the definition of a police chokehold. It would clarify the distinction between a serious use of force and incidental contact with the neck. Bowser's office declined to comment to Axios, probably because people in many of her constituents or many of her adversaries who are left of her will get mad at her about this.
It is amazing. It finally dawns on her, right? She's getting mugged, so to speak, by reality in this way, just in this way, and saying we need to be tough on crime. We've talked about the pendulum. When is it going to swing? When do people in the city say enough? I'm still not convinced we're fully there, but I think we're beginning to see the pendulum slow down on one side. And that's, again, post George Floyd, where we're like, hey, wait a minute, we might have gone a little bit too far. Right. But it is a real problem for her that she has this city council to deal with. They seem to think that it's everybody else's fault but the people committing the crimes.
Right.
So carjackers or whatever. And if you don't have any consequences, real consequences for people who, commit retail theft or they do the carjackings, then you're just going to have more of it. There was one, a video that was recently released of a robbery carjacking at the DC Wharf, which is a very nice part of town. Right. And it was organized, young people coming out of a car to rob people, standing out.
Congressional staffers are getting some of this as well. Yeah, which obviously brings attention to it to Congress.
Yeah, we my wife works with somebody who was attacked, stabbed, in the head by somebody who had just been released. So, and I know somebody, who is, in broad daylight, just on his way to get lunch, and he was tackled, a large group of obviously students not in school. Right. So it's thoroughly depressing.
No, and I think some of the news that comes out of San Francisco, that comes out of Chicago, that previews sort of what's further down this road. I mean, some of the video out of San Francisco, for instance, of formerly very nice neighborhoods with all shuttered businesses at this point, I think might be a bit of a wake-up call in addition to things that are actually happening in the city.
This is what you want,
I should note it's not anyone's imagination. Homicides are up 34% compared to last year, and that's a very small number compared to the amount that carjackings are up. I approach the city very differently than I used to because it is just more dangerous. And this is something I object to in this whole underlying ideology driving so much of progressive circles, is that it's never the fault of the person perpetrating the act.
No.
As long as the person perpetrating the act can be put into a quote unquote oppressed group.
Right.
And that is dangerous to a bunch of innocent people. That kind of thinking.
Yeah.
Because then you come up with this idea that this old man, for instance, can't drive down a street. I believe was that Minnesota where that was caught on tape the other day? He drives into a pro-Palestinian rally where they are blocking an entire highway.
Yeah.
And they're trying to attack him and pull him out of his car. They are mobbing his car. And you don't have to sit there for that. You don't have to become the truck driver from the LA riots.
Yeah.
That is not your obligation. In that situation, but many on the left believe that is your obligation. That when you're carjacked, when you're mobbed, when you're faced with a mugging, when your 1,400 civilians are killed brutally, that you don't have a right to self-defense. And that is bull, and y'all should all get armed. Okay.
There you go. Do you want to end it now or end on a different note?
Let's end on a fun note.
Let's give the
people something fun.
Let's end on a smoky note, a flavorful note, rich in character. This caught my eye, Mary Katharine, which is Sotheby's London is soon going to be auctioning off the Macallan 1926, which was aged in sherry casks for 60 years.
Jeez.
But I don't know if it's from 1926 and then it's just been sitting in a bottle since 1986. Nevertheless, they expect to get between $900,000 and $1.4 million for this bottle. And I get it to a certain extent. We all like an old scotch. You and a number of our friends were kind enough for my 50th birthday to get me
Yes.
2 25-year-old scotches, which were
Because
very
that adds
rich.
up to 50.
That adds up to 50. You remember our friend of ours, John McCormick, said, he thought about 2 18-year-olds and a 14-year-old, and that sounded inappropriate. So didn't do that.
Stuck with 25s.
Right. So let's keep it clean here. It's stuck with 225s, and they're a delight for very special, rare occasions. Here's my concern: something that is 60 years. I don't know if it's meant. If you were to drink it, I don't know if it's meant to be drunk
Yeah,
after
I
that
know. Does
long
it
in a
just sit around?
barrel. In a
Yeah.
barrel, I'll tell you this. For example, bourbons, right?
Okay.
Sometimes you see these very expensive bourbons, aged in, for 12 years, which, unlike Scotch, bourbon ages fast because, where they age it the word is already escaping my mind, the rick houses or whatever they call them. It's driving me nuts and people are yelling at me. I apologize, but it's where they keep the barrels.
Okay.
You get very cold winters, you get very hot summers. The wood expands, contracts. It's a fast advancing age process. You keep it there. So that's why it's like between 2 and 4 years is your typical bourbon. You keep it there for about, 12 years. It really gets to get a bit rich in the smoky department and other
Is it a
departments.
rack house?
Thank you. With the rack house.
you.
I believe
Okay.
it's the rack house. What did I say?
I looked
I was
it
going to
up.
say,
I don't have any
say
special.
rickshaw because I'm having a stroke. Rickshaw,
No, it says
rack house,
it says rack house or rick house. So
Oh, hey, not
There you
bad.
go.
Okay,
That might
okay,
have been where
I'm
that
not
came from.
completely off. I would be. That's my guess. Is that it's probably a bit rich. You would have to add a couple drops of water, but I don't know. I'd be happy with an 18-year-old. Mary Katharine, Scotch. Mary Katharine, are you a Scotch person?
I'm not a smoky person in general.
Yes.
That's not my
Well, there are some
favorite
blends that you
flavor.
would like, but yes. I was going to say, I used to think if you like bourbon, if you like Scotch, you like bourbon and vice versa. And I am discovering more and more people who are just one or the other, particularly bourbon people who are really not into Scotch.
So the thing for me is that I feel like I should be a bourbon or a whiskey or even a Scotch.
I assumed
chick,
you're a
because
bourbon.
I feel like
girl.
that's on brand for me.
Yes,
But it's
totally.
really not my thing. I drink far more gin than brown liquors. And I like bourbon in a good cocktail every now and then. I have tried good Scotch and it is interesting, but I would not say that I enjoy
Interesting.
it. It's like, this is a fascinating flavor, but
That's so funny. My mother-in-law, when she doesn't like something and she goes, it's interesting. Oh, what'd you think about that movie? It was interesting. Oh, so you thought it sucked.
Interesting.
Okay. Finally, if I may, I want to give a call out to our friends at Performance Kitchen. Mary Katharine, it's an unofficial sponsor.
as long as you feed Vic,
yes,
Paul
I will
Performance Kitchen, you get a shout out.
plate and talk for food. So performancekitchen.com, they sent me meal kits, hoping if I liked it, I could say a few nice words about it. I loved it. Here you go. Their motto is food is medicine. And we're talking about medically tailored meals designed by doctors and registered dietitians
Look, this is so good for you.
to combat chronic diseases, things like cancer, heart disease, immunity boost, diabetes. So I said to a friend of mine there, I said, well, if they get something, if you have a special regimen for, gout, let me know. And sure enough, anti-inflammatory. That means sweet and sour chicken with pineapples and bell peppers, Cuban-style braised vegetables and beef. Go to performancekitchen.com. You'll see check if your insurance provider covers it. And if they do,
very nice.
they will cover the meal for free if you qualify. And you can just order it online. They deliver it to your door, paid for by your insurance if you qualify. And it's also, their brand ambassador is David Ortiz, Big Papi. So, it's got to be good.
Well, with you and Big Papi, how can they lose?
Yeah, the two of us are such, paragons of health. As soon as we're done taping this, I'm going to have my chicken enchilada stack. I kid you not. It's in the freezer. It's very easy to cook. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you. Performancekitchen.com. That wraps up this episode of Getting Hammered. Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. And you can follow me on Twitter at Victorina Matus.
You can follow me at NKHammer on Twitter. You can follow the show at Getting Hammered Podcast on YouTube and Instagram, and you should. You can read my Outkick.com column on cancel culture and what it should and could look like. And I am performing
What?
Thursday in DC as part of the DC's Funniest Celebrity Gathering, which means I have to come up with stand-up by Thursday. What would be your bet on whether I've done that yet, Vic?
Well, you've done this before, haven't you?
Actual stand-up, no. So if any of our listeners have tips,
Oh my
feel free to send
goodness.
them along. Look, I can read a room and I can public speak.
Yes.
But this is a different animal.
How
And
long
the
do you
people
have to go up for?
just a few minutes.
Good.
Just a few minutes. And like, who knows who I'm up against? I haven't even looked. I'm afraid to look.
Oh,
but look,
I
I do
have a
think
question.
DC's funniest celebrity is like a fairly low
Yes.
bar. But that means that if I fail, then I've failed a lot.
Right.
And by
It
the way,
might even help
this
you to
all-
be on the early side versus the end side of it. Also, are you? Is it going to be? Are you working blue? What are you doing? Are you going to go in Red Fox, or are you
probably-
going Sinbad?
No, I was thinking more like, I want to be like, am I like a lady Nate Bargatze? That's what he's
Okay.
family friendly.
Okay.
He's funny. He's Southern. Like, he tells a lot of stories about his family. I feel like that's my wheelhouse.
Okay. Okay. Good. Yeah.
But he's
yeah.
also very good and skilled, and I'm not those things. So
You
we'll
would be
see how it
great.
goes.
I love to see a clip of this. This is exciting.
Well, this is, by the way, to benefit the Fisher House Foundation. So happy to humiliate myself on behalf of that cause.
Good cause.
I'm also running the Marine Corps Marathon 10K on behalf of the Travis Manning Foundation. So maybe I'll put up a link for my fundraising for that as well. Look at me.
You are
Trying to cover all my
over the
bases here.
place.
All right. Is it time to wrap it up? Let's wrap
Let's
it
do
up. Thanks, everybody, for getting hammered responsibly. This has been a Nebulous Media podcast. Also, shout out Kurt Russell. Love you, dude.